Morning, everyone. I've been watching and noticing and talking about a lot the constant creep and trying to silence people and trying to close the Overton window about acceptable conversations. And I'm glad that we have a politician who's tweeting about this kind of stuff. Maxime Bernier is tweeting, quote, 30 years after the USSR, the left's totalitarian impulse is reemerging. They want to control the press and social media, prevent debate, compel speech, brainwash our kids. They say issues are settled, get hysterical and call you Nazi, declare states of emergency to impose their views. Yeah, it doesn't really get us anywhere. It doesn't solve any problems. It just silences people in order to further their agenda. And that's not how things work. That's not how things should work in Canada, and it's not how things should work in a democracy, right? If you have a good idea, let's talk about it. We need to hammer it out and figure it out. And sometimes people are going to be offended. And other times, we're going to have consensus. But never should you have an expectation of feeling safe all the time when discussing difficult topics. What a strange thing to expect. Welcome to being an adult. There are uncomfortable things to talk about. Things are much more gray than they are black and white. All right. Here's the liberal gun ban, which I disagree with completely, and it's ticking closer to being reality. I'm not sure if they're going to get it done before the election or before they rise for summer or anything to that effect, but it looks like they're going to try. They're going to try really hard. Bill C-71 was passed last night, and well, we'll look at the report from here from iPolitics. Now, iPolitics is very slanted, but not many other newspapers were discussing this particular new law. Interesting. Liberal gun bill passes, firearm owners turn to assault rifle ban. A government bill repealing contentious conservative changes to Canada's firearm law cleared its final hurdle in Parliament Tuesday, paving the way for an even tougher battle over guns as the October election approaches. Bill C-71, strongly opposed by gun lobbies and firearms owners since Public Safety Minister Ralph Goodall tabled it in the House of Commons March 20th, 2018, sailed through its final Senate vote with independent and Liberal senators outnumbering Conservatives and a handful of other opponents, 55-33. After the independent Senate group used its overwhelming Senate majority to defeat amendments, Conservative senators managed to get through in committee study. The legislation now requires only royal assent to become law. Bill C-71 also extends background checks for license applications and renewals, which could extend back for a lifetime instead of a 5-year check under the previous law. The legislation, however, also repeals Conservative amendments to the criminal code that gave Cabinet the power to overrule RCMP classifications for restricted and prohibited firearms. Last-minute changes before the 2015 election that allowed then Conservative Public Safety Minister Steve Blaney to rescind the prohibited designations the Canadian Firearms Program had given to certain semi-automatic rifles imported from Czechoslovakia and Switzerland. Under Bill C-71, amendments to the Firearms Act, Cabinet will continue to have authority to adjust the RCMP classifications for restricted and prohibited firearms, but only to increase the level of restriction rather than to lower it as the Conservative government did. Sure, you can make more laws, but you cannot, or you can restrict firearms more, but you can't loosen it. Unbelievable, right? Back to the article. For activists in the firearm community, attention has already shifted to the Trudeau government's reaction to calls for a ban on handguns and military-style semi-automatic rifles in the wake of gang violence and shootings last summer and the January 29, 2017 shootings of 6 Muslim worshippers at a Quebec City mosque. Recent claims that Border Security and Organized Crime Reduction Minister Bill Blair is considering prohibition of the AR-15 semi-automatic rifle and possibly other semi-automatic rifles through regulation by Cabinet has sparked at least 3 of Canada's major firearm rights organizations to spur members and supporters into preparations for a campaign leading up to the October 19 federal election. Blair has not confirmed or denied the rumor, which began with a statement from former Conservative MP Tony Clement, now sitting as an independent in the Commons after his expulsion from the Conservative caucus over sexual exchanges on Instagram that had led to extortion attempts. And that's where I'm going to leave that one, but concerning. And if you are thinking that they won't go for a gun ban, they are, and it's happening currently. It might happen before the election, but it will certainly be an election issue. Here's National Post reporting on Andrew Scheer's speech, and this is an opinion piece, so I like to share these because it's interesting to see what people's opinions are. So National Post is reporting, quote, Andrew Scheer has chosen a weird moment to go soft. That's what I thought too. And like yesterday, I did the speech, I looked at it, and it was an awful speech for somebody whose job it is. And I mean, I understand Andrew Scheer is courting the center, but does he have to be left of center? Like, it seems just crazy. Anyway, the speech was bad. If I didn't have Mr. Bernier to look to as a sane, solid alternative, and I said this to my friend yesterday, I can't believe that there are people who are conservatives who are still supporting Mr. Scheer after last night's speech. It was bad. It was a bad speech. And because it didn't lay down any policy. There was no more meat in it than there was in last year's speech. We're going to give a pathway to temporary foreign workers. We're going to give a pathway to low-skill workers who are here. And we're going to take as many Canadians as needed. And Canadian means anybody in the world who wants to come here. Just unbelievable. Unbelievable. So what a weird moment to go soft on that. And this is not about that necessarily, but it's an extension of the same thing. National Post. Here we go. Not much surprises me in politics anymore, at least not if it's feebly bad. But is this really the time for Andrew Scheer to go mushy on balancing the budget? The CBC thinks so, saying, quote, the Liberals were counting on Scheer on tying Scheer to the Ford government's austerity. That's going to be harder now. Didn't Ford win? Yeah, he did. And he's not doing quite as much as I'd like. I'd like him to go further. But anyway, that's a different show. If you follow the news, which surely Scheer or his staff do, you'd also know the European parliamentary election just delivered a stunning rebuff to the status quo parties, especially in Britain, where Nigel Farage's fledgling 4-month-old Brexit party won 32% of the vote and 29 of the 73 seats, leaving Labour and Conservative a dusty third and fifth with 22% and 14 seats between them. Unbelievable. Also, Australia's right-wing Liberals just trumpeted. No, they didn't. They triumphed in an unwinnable election by thumbing their noses at climate alarmism. Yeah, and that's what it is, alarmism. I'm going to scroll down here because there's more, but there's a lot of examples of people rejecting the party, rejecting the thought pattern of we can't win this, and they're voting their conscience because there is no other choice. You've got a globalist, and two other weak leaders, Elizabeth May and Jagmeet Singh, and you've got Maxime Bernier, and that's your choice. It's very libcons. Miss May, who thinks Omar Khadr's got more effing class than the whole cabinet, and Jagmeet Singh. Really. Back to the article. In March 2017, Tory leadership contender Scheer sounded fiscally hawkish, quote, if Justin Trudeau can rack up $30 billion deficits in just 1 year, surely Conservatives can return Canada back to balanced budget in 2 years. Now they can't, and it's all someone else's fault. Specifically, that awful Trudeau, whose own pledge to balance the budget went the way of all flesh except faster. But Trudeau seems genuinely to think everything important should be done by the government, whereas if Scheer had beliefs, he'd think the opposite. So what will he cut? Nothing. Why? Poll focus groups. Mumble, excuse, attack, retreat, hide, equivocate, whatever that says. Vote for me. We don't have to. Maxime Bernier may, like Nigel Farage, be hard to work with for far or near. Maybe hard to work with for or near. But when he says Canada has only one major party, the Libcons, cynical and inept, the Tories promptly confirm Robert Conquest's third law of politics. The simplest way to explain the behavior of any bureaucratic organization is to assume it's controlled by a cabal of its enemies. By embracing deficits from here to eternity, aka after the next election. Right. So no longer are the Conservatives planning on balancing the budget. They are going to spend and spend and spend so people don't get mad at them in the newspapers. Well, right. Very, very, very interesting strategy. And some people think that is the strategy. I think it's just ineptness. But if that's the strategy, if this is what Andrew Scheer's balancing on and hoping for, I don't know how many people it's going to fool. Because most of Ontario has a poison pill for the Conservative Party because 24/7 attack ads have Doug Ford on the run when he hasn't done anything wrong necessarily. And the healthcare spending, etc. Well, I mean, that's been a quagmire for 20 years. I remember 2003 when Dalton McGuinty raised the health tax to implemented a $70 health surcharge and said, that's it. Now we're going to solve the problem. No, it just kept going up. And hallway medicine was born and is continuing. And so I feel like we need a shakeup in that system too. But that is another podcast as well. Here is the last story for this morning. And it's a little bit of a long one. And it's really, really concerning. Here it is. Global News is reporting how Canada's legal system helped an alleged Chinese gangster avoid deportation for decades. Yeah, really. For almost as long as he's lived in Canada, immigration officials have been trying to deport him. Kwok Chun Tam is a 61-year-old convicted drug trafficker and an alleged kingpin of the notorious Chinese crime cartel, the Big Circle Boys. But now, But how is Tam, a man who between 1991 and 2014 was accused by Canadian law enforcement officials of being a heroin importer, a chemical drug lab operator, and a, quote, known loan shark, with a history of violence, been able to beat the system and defy a government that has long wanted him gone? Global News has obtained thousands of documents that detail how Tam came to Canada and how Canada's criminal justice and immigration system aided him in avoiding deportation. As Global News has reported, Tam's powerful connections and alleged ties to the organized crime could also make him the poster child for BC's long-awaited public inquiry into money laundering. Despite all this, and despite more than 2 decades of efforts to deport him, Tam has remained in Canada for the past 30 years, and according to recent legal filings, is believed to be living in his $900,000 Richmond, BC condo. Global News has reviewed thousands of pages of records prepared by Tam's lawyer, Vancouver-based immigration lawyer Peter Laurie, and their government that was submitted to the federal court as part of an effort to keep Tam in Canada. The records, which include volumes of immigration and law enforcement files stretching back to 1988, outline nearly 3 decades of alleged criminal activity and Tam's alleged connections to organized crime. Mr. Tam has instructed us to caution you regarding the allegations of participation in organized crime and, in particular, gang members, a statement from Tam's lawyer to Global News said. But a review of Tam's reported links to southern China, alleged allegations of casino loan sharking, and his alleged participation in Vancouver's private mortgage lending market, where Tam, according to his own legal filings, used BC property to secure loans in China, suggests Tam could be at the center of the so-called Vancouver model of transnational crime. Tam arrived in Vancouver International Airport on December 5th, 1988. Records show that at the time of his arrival, Tam had $1,200 in cash and reported transfers of another $570,000 in various stages from Hong Kong to BC bank accounts held in the name of his then-wife, Chi Lin Yip. Sorry, again, I forgot that wrong. Or Yip is also a convicted criminal who also arrived in Vancouver 5 months earlier to make a refugee claim. Sorry, there was no also there. When questioned by Canadian immigration officials, Tam reportedly said he did not have a passport and claimed it was kept by the man who smuggled him from Hong Kong to Thailand and then to Korea, where he boarded Singapore Airlines flight 018 to Vancouver, records show. Following an initial screening in which he said he did not plan to return to China, Tam made a refugee claim saying he feared persecution because of his wealth and because of his past political activities. Tam also claimed he would face severe punishment from Chinese government because his support of pro-democracy student protests, records show. I scroll down a bit. In the 5 years between the time he arrived in Canada and when he submitted details of his refugee claim, Tam was convicted of theft under $1,000 and was also alleged to have participated in a string of home invasions that terrorized residents of Vancouver's Chinese community. The robbers, who forced themselves into homes where they terrorized families before relieving them of cash, jewelry, and other valuables, are becoming increasingly violent, police say. A report in Tam's immigration file alleged. In 1991, an immigration enforcement manager referred to Tam's alleged role in home invasions, claiming, quote, "There is no doubt that all 5 arrested are involved in organized crime in Vancouver." A later report noted that Tam was not charged in the case, even though authorities allege he was found in possession of 10 stolen Rolex watches. Yip was also convicted of a credit card fraud and possession of stolen property in the 1990s, records show. Court files also show the Vancouver police and the RCMP were investigating Tam for alleged links to organized crime and heroin trafficking as early as 1990. Then, in October 1993, after Tam and Yip were deemed inadmissible to Canada because of their past criminal convictions, Canada's Immigration and Refugee Board, IRB, issued the couple their first deportation order. The pair was, however, allowed to remain in Canada while their refugee claim was processed. It wasn't until June 1996 that this claim was rejected. This decision was based largely upon testimony from Tam and Yip that a decision maker at the IRB deemed untrustworthy. Quote, "I have found the claimants to be less than candid and forthright in the presentation of their evidence, which, when considered in totality, has caused me to find that their evidence on the whole is untrustworthy," wrote IRB member Lane Daggett in 1996 decision. I scroll down again. These are all just a laundry list of further crimes and stuff. I'm just getting to the important stuff because this is a long article. Okay, more charges, more delays. In addition to the 1998 charges, Tam was also charged with conspiracy to import and traffic heroin in 1999. Tam was acquitted of these charges in 2002 due in part to the fact that a BC trial judge ruled as inadmissible the wiretap evidence that reportedly linked Tam to Chinese organized crime. With these charges behind him, Tam was informed by immigration officials in 2003 that he was once again eligible to submit a pre-removal risk assessment to prevent his deportation. Canada immigration officials then contacted Chinese consular officials in Vancouver to get the necessary documents to send Tam back to China. I scroll down again. The federal court records do not specifically indicate why he wasn't removed at this time, but in December 2004, 6 months after the CIC said it was ready to deport him, Tam received Stage 1 approval to remain in Canada on humanitarian and compassionate grounds. Scroll down. According to the officer who made this decision, Tam's 15-year stay in Canada, his relationship with his children, including 2 Canadian-born children, plus the fact that he had received a pardon for his 1992 criminal conviction, outweighed the negative issues in his life. The officer also noted that Tam had no outstanding criminal or civil matters before the courts at the time of the decision, and that Tam had supported a large extended family in Vancouver. More criminal charges. After the 2004 positive immigration decision, investigation into Tam alleged criminal activities continued, including investigations led by Canadian Border Services Agency, CBSA, and Richmond RCMP, which in September 2006 targeted a home owned by Tam as part of a probe into a marijuana grow-op. The RCMP said police quickly entered Tam's home and arrested a 20-year-old male relative. 2 officers then rushed up the stairs and arrested a woman plus 2 other individuals at gunpoint, the report said. Officers then identified what they claimed was a chemical drug lab. Fearing the home could be dangerous to neighbors and nearby elementary schools, police called in a hazmat team before reportedly seizing narcotics worth about $500,000 on the street, according to the report, and over $100,000 in cash, ammunition, and money counter found in the kitchen cabinet. I scroll down again. Records show that the officer who made this decision. Okay, so then in November 2015, with his criminal conviction and sentence out of the way, an immigration officer rejected Tam's permanent residency application. Records show that the officer who made this decision referenced 2 separate CBSA reports that declared Tam inadmissible to Canada. The first, written in 2014, discussed Tam's 2010 criminal convictions. The second, written roughly 1 month later, discussed his alleged connections to organized crime, specifically referencing police testimony that claimed Tam was a high-level member of the Big Circle Boys, a loan shark and heroin trafficker. I scroll down again. Tam appealed the decision. In December 2015, following the negative immigration decision from a month earlier, Tam's lawyer submitted an appeal to the federal court. His lawyer argued the government unfairly raised alleged connections to organized crime without giving Tam an opportunity to respond to these claims. But before a hearing could be held, the office of then Liberal Immigration Minister John McCallum, who later became Canada's ambassador to China, settled the case, giving Tam another shot at staying in Canada. When the application was denied for a second time, a year later, Tam's lawyers again appealed the decision. This time, they argued the officer who rejected the file erred by mistakenly saying Tam was sentenced to 15 months in jail because of his 2010 conviction when he was actually given a 15 months conditional sentence with no jail time. Don't deport him. He wasn't given jail time despite the drug lab, etc., etc. Back to the article. This, according to Tam's lawyers, tainted the immigration officer's perception of the seriousness of Tam's role in the marijuana grow-up, which Tam described as minor and inactive. I just owned the house. They all did everything else, and I took 20%. Whatever. Back to the article. But like the first appeal, lawyers for the Department of Justice, acting on behalf of the Office of Immigration Minister Ahmed Hassan, settled the case before a hearing could be held. The terms of this settlement are unknown, and Hassan's office has not responded to questions about Tam's current status in Canada. The government also declined to say why it did not continue fighting the case in court. According to records filed in 2018 civil case in BC courts and land title records, Tam is believed to be residing in Richmond, BC. So, our immigration system is terribly, terribly broken. Our refugee system is being exploited by rich people who come here to use our weak money laundering laws and weak ability to protect our borders and citizens by deportation, etc. They exploit that and they make our country less safe. If you think that that's not true, have another read. Maybe rewind 5 minutes and listen again to the things that this man and this family have gotten away with over and over again. And as Vancouver descends into a very, very expensive place to launder money for foreigners to Canada. And it's so popular that it's named after Vancouver, the Vancouver model. Unbelievable. And we can't even get rid of them. According to records filed in 2018 civil case in BC courts and land title records, Tam is believed to be residing in Richmond, BC. Unbelievable. No, just pull up a chair. Do you want some CPP with that? Yeah. How about some retirement funds? Yeah. Just so disappointing, right? Just terribly disappointing. All right. Well, thank you for watching. Have a wonderful day. And sorry, this is a long one. This last story was a long one. Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out thepeoplespartyofcanada.ca.